Hello, my name is Ashley Puckett, and I live in Beaumont, Texas. If you don't know where that's at, it's about an hour and a half from MD Anderson, Southeast Texas area. I am 31 years old, and in October of 2022 is when I first started showing symptoms of my cancer, but I wasn't diagnosed with the very rare cancer that I have. It's called Adrenal Cortical Carcinoma. I wasn't diagnosed with that until March of the following year in 2023. I am stage 4, and I've been living with stage 4 cancer ever since then. It is extremely rare. It affects 300 to 400 people in the U.S. every year, so that factors out to about 1 in a million people in the U.S. When I first started having symptoms, they were very mild, and it was really only pain related. I was having some mild flank pain, like back pain, just on the left side, which is where the tumor was discovered. I would put the pain at like a 3 out of 10, and it would always happen after like long car rides. So I chalked it up to bad posture. Now this kind of it was on and off throughout the next several months, all the way up until about January. And then I had severe back pain that manifested at a friend's house. I was sitting on the floor, we were like having a game night or something, and it just overtook my whole body. I mean, it was probably like a 7 or 8 out of 10. And I mean, it eventually settled down over the course of a couple of days. It went away, and like I had always done, I said, well, that was weird. My posture must really be bad. And so fast forward to February, I started to develop a like pinching pain around my rib cage, which was new. I had never had that, and it was persistent, like a just constant all throughout the day in like a specific spot. And that is what kind of got me worried, because I couldn't figure out what that could be. It kind of scared me a little bit. And I had some family kind of tell me, oh, it could be this or that, it might be something serious. Maybe you should get it checked out. So we went to my local hospital here, and, they ran a bunch of tests. They did, blood work, X-ray, and I'm not sure what else. I do know that I came in with really high blood pressure. It was 190s over like 105, if I'm remembering correctly. I was not aware that I had high blood pressure, but I think it had been ongoing. I just hadn't been checking it. And I was also really anxious, so I'm sure that was playing a part. But they came back and they said, we see something a little bit funny on your X-ray. It looks like it could be maybe like an infection in one of your lungs or something. And I had no respiratory symptoms. So that's when they gave me the COVID test, and it came back negative. All the stuff they checked came back negative. So, they sent me in for a CT because they just couldn't figure out what was going on. And it was a good thing that I had that CT, because that's when they discovered the tumor, which I believe was around 11 centimeters at the time, coming off of my adrenal gland. And at this point, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I think I went around 8, and finally around 2 in the morning, we kind of started getting answers. And the doctor, she comes in, and she just has this look on her face like, oh no, I'm about to give you some bad news. And my stomach kind of just dropped, because I saw the way she looked at me, and, the whole mood in the room just kind of changed. My fiance, he came with me to the hospital, but it had gotten so late and the chairs were so uncomfortable that he was sleeping in the car in the parking lot, when she told me. But yeah, she gave me all the news of this enormous tumor coming off of my adrenal gland. And that the very last thing she said was, it has metastasized to your lung. And I could tell she didn't want to say that part, because that means stage 4. I didn't quite understand at that point anything about what she was saying, but she said, yeah, it's 95% sure you have cancer. Of course, they can't really tell you that 100% until they biopsy it. But she kind of ended all of that with, we don't think we can handle this here. So we're going to have to transfer you to an ICU. I was totally dissociated from the whole thing. I kind of went into shock a little bit. And just, it was a really surreal experience. And, they sent me home after 3 days because I didn't have insurance. The oncologist finally came in and said, yeah, I don't think it's ethical to treat you without insurance. So they sent in a social worker and he goes, here, call this number. He hands me his phone. Call this number, talk to an agent, get insurance. So from the ICU bed, I'm talking to an insurance agent. So I had to wait a full month for the insurance to kick in. So at that point, yeah, they just sent me home to wait for even a biopsy. So I had to go home and wait to even know what my real diagnosis was. I didn't really have any coping skills at the time for these things because I'd never gone through it. I had just been working, doing life, and medical issues were not something I had ever actually dealt with. So it kind of all just hit me like a train. I kind of went into this like state of almost paralysis where all of a sudden it was almost as if I could feel the tumor more even. I was like, oh, that's what that is. And it made me like afraid to move and get out of my bed. And I was like, oh, am I going to make it worse? Is it going to rupture? That sort of thing. Because that can happen actually, because these types of tumors are very, very fragile. They're kind of like an egg. So, you know, but even at the time I didn't know, but that was still a thought because I knew how big it was. And yeah, I actually lost weight. I wasn't even on treatment and I was at my heaviest in my life. And then I started losing weight because I wasn't eating well, because I was so paralyzed by this fear of worrying, not knowing anything. I even asked the nurse that told me the news because I was in this like state of shock and didn't know. I was like, if I kind of die soon, and she kind of changed her demeanor a little bit. She's like, oh no, but like this is serious. This is very, very serious, and that just stuck with me. So I was like, well, I'm waiting here for a month when I have something so serious going on, and I have no idea what exactly that means and how fast things need to be moving. So yeah, it was like each day I was like, let's just get through the day and we'll move on to the next day. And okay, we'll move on to the next day. There's another day down. So I was just looking at my calendar every day, just compulsively checking the days off until I could get the insurance. Once I got the biopsy results and I knew what I had for sure, I started digging and digging and digging. I put all of that anxious energy into like finding out more about my type of cancer. And so I joined some adrenal cancer Facebook support groups and started talking to them. And I just started talking to people and watching YouTube videos, which there's a few conferences on there like that have a few of the experts that exist in the United States. There's only like a handful of them. And they kind of put together this conference of all this educational information. And I one night I like stayed up all night because I was so anxious and freaked out because I didn't know what my future was going to look like. And I wanted to know what my options were. So yeah, I did that a lot. And, that's just, I couldn't get my mind to like separate from what I was going through, like whatsoever. So that was really a difficult time for me. Probably one of the most difficult that I've dealt with so far, even after everything I've been through. It was that beginning stage.
Should we just
do whatever you want? It doesn't matter. So like when I was in these groups, they were telling me, "Oh, you need to see this doctor and this doctor," and um, these people are located in Maryland, and I live in Texas. So they're located at the National Institute of Health, um, and so that's a research facility. They're doing research on my type of cancer. So I had a girl in the support group. She actually called me, and she was, giving me all this information, and she even put me on a three-way call with uh, someone from the NIH about like getting set up, and the lady was like, "Oh, it doesn't work like that. She's gonna have to do this, that, and the other." And eventually, someone actually gave me the specialist's direct phone number and direct email, so I didn't have to go through all the red tape. Like I could just contact her directly, Dr. Del Rivero, and so because I wanted to get like recommendations and second opinions and see what a true expert would say. So it was really the support group that led me in that direction, and I kept seeing her name over and over and over again in these groups. I mean, there's a handful, but what really helped me out was the fact that this is like all government funded, so all treatment, surgery, anything, travel, lodging, it's all covered. So for me, it was kind of perfect because um, I at a certain point I could not work anymore because the symptoms had kind of uh worsened a little bit to where my blood pressure was I was keeping track of it and it was really high, and my heart rate would get super high, like 160s, resting sometimes. And so I didn't feel like it was safe for me to work. I mean, I was afraid to even get up and use the restroom because my heart would start pounding like so crazy. So I stopped working and I was like, well, I don't have an insurance that I can go see MD Anderson, which is super close to me. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of FDA approved treatment options. We only have one line of chemo that is FDA approved right now. It's EDP, so etoposide, doxorubicin, and cisplatin, and that is an inpatient chemo. So you don't show up and sit in a chair like I've seen. I didn't know. I actually showed up to my first chemotherapy, thinking I was going to go home after like an infusion or something. I just did. I guess I didn't ask enough questions prior. But I get to the hospital and they're like, "Oh no, you're going to be here for a few days." It's a very intensive chemo, so it's 4 days worth of infusions, and the first day is doxorubicin, which is, I believe, otherwise known as the Red Devil. And they have to do all sorts of testing beforehand and make sure your heart's okay. And mine was good. I mean, I didn't have any issues there. Um, and see, the second day I believe is etoposide, and then the third day is a combination of etoposide and cisplatin, and then the fourth day is a repeat of the third day. It's 2 days are the same, but usually I'd always be there like 5 or 6 days due to delays in the medication or just getting things set up, getting there late, that sort of thing. So the first cycle that I had, the first and the second actually were the worst by far. And I don't know if my body was just adjusting to things, it didn't know what hit it, but I think by day 2 I was hugging the toilet. And I just remember thinking like, this should be temporary. This is what happens. This is what you think of when you think of chemo, I guess. But I almost felt so bad that I didn't care. It was really strange. And my blood counts are kind of low too, so that makes you just feel so out of it. By the end, I needed a blood transfusion because I was right on the cusp of them being too low. Like they almost could have sent me home, but they just wanted to be on the safe side. And yeah, a lot of fatigue for about a week, maybe a little less. But there was a lot of vomiting. I'm already a small person, so I didn't have a lot of weight to lose to begin with. I think my heaviest before my diagnosis was 108 pounds. And I'm only 5 feet tall, so not the best situation for me to be in. Uh, and I was told to get the 2 rounds of EDP and then get a scan to see if it was responding. So, yeah, we did a scan after those 2 cycles of just torture, basically. It was just a lot of what you hear about. I mean, I learned how to cope with it over time. Like I would figure out that I could tolerate mac and cheese, and so that's kind of like all I would eat. um, and I made it through. We did a scan. We did see shrinkage. I think by the time I started chemo, that big tumor that I had grown to like 16 centimeters. And it was so painful. But one good thing about chemo is all that pain went away after the first cycle, like almost immediately. So, I did get relief from the pain, but then I had to deal with all the side effects from chemo. So it was kind of a give and take situation. Um, and at the same time that I was doing chemo, I was having to take a medication called Mitotane, and it is the only FDA approved medication for us. And it's been used since the 60s. They haven't really approved anything else, unfortunately. And the pills are enormous, very chalky. What it does is it basically shuts down adrenal function and supposedly can help shrink things, but more often than not, just kind of slows things down. So they use it conjunctively with the chemo. So at one point, by the second round of chemo that I did, I was taking 9 of those per day, and they would make me gag, and which would cause more throwing up. So that was really hard to deal with. And then I developed hypothyroidism due to that medication. It does a lot of damage to the body. It shuts down your adrenal glands so they don't produce cortisol anymore. And then you have to take hydrocortisone, which is kind of like synthetic cortisol. I mean, you have to have cortisol or things get very bad for you. You would end up like in an adrenal crisis. So I had to get a medical bracelet everywhere I went, just in case, like if you get really stressed out or you're sick or develop a lot of pain, you can go into adrenal crisis because your body isn't producing cortisol, which is a stress hormone, to deal with it. And so I learned a lot about that. I didn't really know a lot about it before all of this started. And I have to have emergency injections now. It's kind of almost the same concept as an EpiPen, but it's more difficult to administer because you have to actually draw up the medication. And so, like, if I'm ever on the verge of an adrenal crisis, I have to inject myself and then go to the ER, just in case. But we don't think that's going to happen now. I'm off of that medication now. But my adrenal gland is the one that I have is still not producing enough cortisol to not take the hydrocortisone. So I'm having to basically give myself thyroid hormones and the synthetic stress hormone. And these are all due to just the side effects of the treatment. This isn't even because of the cancer. So that's just kind of like what I'm dealing with now as an after effect. I did those 2 rounds. Then they told me to do a 3rd round of chemo because we were trying to get to surgery so I could get that big tumor out of me. And I was going to go up to the NIH to go get that done by one of their amazing surgeons, Dr. Hernandez. They typically will keep the tumors too and basically do different treatments and see what like might work like on a petri dish type of thing. So my goal was to get up there, and so I did the 3rd round. I was actually in the middle of getting it. I was in the hospital still when I got the call saying they had approved my surgery. So that helped me to push through that 3rd cycle because I was so happy and I didn't know if we were going to get there or not. I've seen people not make it through those beginning stages of chemo and even have their tumor removed before things got really bad. So that's like the ultimate goal, is to get the tumor out in the beginning. The faster you can, the better. And so that's where things took another kind of turn. I had never had surgery in my life other than my port, but I was awake for that. So then we start preparing for a trip up north for massive surgery. I'm all set up in my, I was about to say hotel room because that's where I've been, but no, hospital room. Just kind of relaxing. We did our testing, and I'm having to drink this lovely stuff. It was a full open surgery, so I have an incision, or I have a scar now from like right under my rib cage, like right in the middle, like as high as you can go before, like right under my heart, maybe I would say, all the way down past my belly button, right under it. So it's probably at least 10 inches, maybe 11 inches, something like that. After my surgery, I was down to 82 pounds. I was itty bitty, and so, that's just been because I was at my heaviest, and then all of a sudden this hit me, and then I was back down to being horribly underweight, and so that really played a part in my mental health, and also like having to just have this feeling of helplessness, because I realized there were so many things I couldn't do, mostly due to the side effects of the medications I was on. Like, for instance, like I couldn't even tolerate being outside in the summer because the Texas heat, it really puts a lot of stress on your body whenever you don't have any stress hormones and the adrenal insufficiency. I did eventually have to do more chemo after surgery, but it actually ended up not working anymore during my 4th and 5th rounds. So I have moved away from chemo as of February. That was my last cycle. I'm doing immunotherapy, and they pulled me off of that medication, mitotane, and they put me on a different medication called lenvatinib, or Lenvima. It's a TKI inhibitor, so it's more like a targeted therapy. I don't have many side effects from it, so they use that as a combination. They see that when you do that combo, it's better than just the Keytruda alone. So I only have to take 2 pills a day now, not 9 of those awful chalky pills. And I will say I have, symptom-wise, as far as the cancer goes, I feel way better. There are some indicators, like some tumor markers that they're looking at, that have significantly gone down. So my team is seeing that things are trending in the right direction. So, I'm hopeful that this new treatment is what's working. And I know some people in my support group who were on the exact same combination, and they're having amazing results, like stage 4, like me, to no evidence of disease within not a horribly long time. Don't just idly sit back and let things happen if things don't feel right. Like, talk to multiple people. Join support groups. Absolutely join support groups if you can find them. Because not only do they provide great advice, especially like in my case, when there's not a whole lot of information, especially on the internet, a lot of it's outdated. But the sense of community that you get from it, that's just priceless to me. I have made so many amazing friends in the ACC community, and there are usually support groups for every diagnosis that you can think of. I mean, mine is so rare, and there's 3 that I'm in on social media, so I always recommend, if I find someone that has my diagnosis, that's like the first thing I think of, is I try to plug them into the support groups. So it just helps in so many different ways. It changed my whole trajectory